Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Aliens and Angels podcast. And today I'm very happy to introduce you to my friend, Frankie Fearless. And I want to tell you a little bit about him. Frank is a writer, producer, MC, host of Frank Castle Fearless, and is a founding member of the music group Heist Click, as well as a neo shaman. Neo shamanism is not a single cohesive belief system, but a collective term for many philosophies and activities. Frank's most current music project, Sons of the Sun, debuts high frequency futuristic nostalgia vibes back into the listening environment of music lovers everywhere. You can access his music at youtube.com/at Sons of the Sun. And by the way, it's spelled SUNS of the SUN, in case you're looking for him. All of the links are featured below in the description. Please do check me out, subscribe to my channels, leave me a comment, like my videos, and please do share my videos and my content with your friends. And I'm happy to announce that you can now join my channel to take advantage of my perks. So without further ado, let's bring on Frank Castle. Frank, welcome to the Aliens and Angels podcast. So nice to have you back.
Karen, everyone listening, angels, aliens, prepare for the frequency. Thank you for having me back. I love being with you and having conversations with you. Someone a few days ago mentioned for the Fearless Conversation show we did together, they said you guys are solution oriented. And I was like, wow, it's the first time I heard that. Like, not that we don't offer solutions, but I tell stories. Hopefully you get from the story, and you actually came in with solution. Like, look, we can do this. I guess when the rubber met the road with those two, people were like, wow, finally, it's not just hands in the air, like with the stories and all the crazy. Like, we're giving you everyday solutions that will work and get you in the position that you need to be in to be part of that conversation. So thank you for having me back.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you for having me on your show. Yeah, I'm very solution oriented, as are you, Frank. And that is also a way that the listeners and the viewers can tell who's authentic and who's not, because anybody can just recapitulate what they've heard on a dozen YouTube videos and sound like they know what they're talking about. But when you can actually put it into practical application or offer unique insights and experiences on the subject, then you know that person absolutely knows what they're talking about. And I'm very grateful for both this show and my Wednesday show, the Quantum Guide Show, because I've gotten to know an amazing group of people who I can count on, that I know are the real thing. And that is what I want to bring to the listeners and viewers, because I can remember when I was first waking up, Frank, there was not much out there for me to go to. Of course, this number of years ago now, but still, I wanted to create shows that are basically what I wished I had when I was sort of waking up to all of this. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, Frank.
Yeah, I was with a select group of people that seemed to be in the know at the time when I went through it. And when I look back, I'm like, from my level at least, Terrence McKenna was the only one hitting me at the time. And
Yep.
I didn't like him at first. So before ayahuasca, I didn't listen. I couldn't stand his voice. I might have even said a few things. And then soon as I had my experience, he was the only one that understood what I was going through. And I said, so he's the only one. There's only a handful. Like, you could count them out. And you could be like, well, there's a group of us here. I'm sure there's groups everywhere, but we're the only ones really talking about it, with the exception of this guy and this girl. And I just wish I had more. And then they were just talking about it. They weren't offering anything. So, I mean, sales of products and stuff, but I mean, like, my version of help is the shadow work, right? You do your shadow work. You're going to be okay. You clean your house. You clean your room, you pick up after the dog, You make sure everyone's fed, you're sleeping right, you're not being like a jerk all the time, like you're sympathetic to people and stuff. You're healing your traumas. When you start doing that, you automatically do what we're doing, minus you don't need the ayahuasca and you might not need the handbook and the guidebook, but you'll have it happening. That's how the journey starts. Everyone's different. For me, I have a specific contract to be here at this
Yeah,
time.
me too.
Only go through this with you and others,
Mhm,
but to also transform in the moment. So they were like, some people are the example
mhm,
at first, because everyone's always going to be the example for someone. But
mhm,
we mean like a public example, like you can do this. So you're one of those with your wife. So you're going to take the walk and talk about it as you go. Not
mhm.
everybody's here to do that this round, but they need people to see that you can do that. You can be more. Right. So I'm grateful for this. And I know we're making the connections. Now, this is not, this is a shout out to Spectaphil and Unexplained Inc. podcast. I was on yesterday. It airs at the end of December, but he was talking to me about meeting me and how the connections went off. And it was you. So he spoke to you. He kept talking about you. And I'm like, she's a buddy of mine. And he's like, what? I'm like, he goes, yeah, you've been on the show. I go, no,
Yeah.
no, you don't understand.
No,
We're
we're friends.
we're making a web.
We're real friends. Yeah.
So we're making the connection. So when you show up and you're like, I'm having my experience now, we're right there. And he goes, yeah, it's like magnetically, you guys moved into position for me. And I go, right. That's how this works. We draw each other to us because we're one, but we're individual. So that's the magic. You want the magic? Let's go activate it. Let's get everyone on board and start moving in that direction. And we're here. We've been here now. Now it's years into it, and we've put the blood, sweat, and tears. Now they're like, this is how they explain it to me. No, no more crying for you. Now we just move into position, warrior.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, okay. And I believe, by the way, all of this, all of my experiences at least, and all of what we're learning for when the matrix inside of you that you believe that's been constructed to hold you down collapses, what's standing there? The aliens and angels.
Mhm,
Can you stand in the presence of these beings? Now,
mhm,
it's only your flesh that has the issue because you're source, right? You can stand in the presence, but everything's here for you. So you can, like a child or like a baby taking a diaper off and now being able to use the bathroom on its own. Right. We level up into these things, but too early of the experience could ruin it. It could take you left and right. But right now, the timelines have collapsed. We've done the work, we've paved the road. They're standing right here. They're right here waiting. Can we do it? This has
yeah.
been a big one for me. I had a mushroom experience the other night, and they were like telling me your body is going to be new by the time we get there. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they were like it looked like they were putting me in an avatar of like a higher version of myself, but putting the parts on me. Like, you're not ready for this part, but you're ready for this one and this one. And it's going to
Mhm,
house your higher self. And I'm like, whoa, let's go. And then peekaboo, they play the game. Here, take a look. If you open your eyes and you see us, what is it? And you're like, well, I don't want to open my eyes and see anybody just standing in my house. And then you feel it. And you're like, whoa, can I take that presence? Can I get over the fear of it? Because it's always fearful because you don't know. And then can I stand there with them and be in not shock and awe, but greetings to a family member?
mhm.
They would prefer you being like, hey, what's up? Rather than, oh, because that feeling of high frequency on the really high levels is enough to bring you to your knees. That's why you hear a lot in books and stuff. Like when the power arrives, the being arrives, everyone drops to their knees all of a sudden. It's just you're overcome by everything.
Yeah.
But all these beings that are there, and what we're made out of like the entire universal structure. So we arrive and we see them, and then now we're like, oh, some people are praying, some people are bowing, some people are standing there and whatever. But I tend to believe they're all there for us because we're source in the
Hmm.
body, in the human body, with the range of emotions of all. So you have all feeling. So which means inside the holographic matrix, the universal organic one, the raw organic matrix we live in, that entire system then works for you, not against you, because it's you. And I know that sounds
Yeah.
really weird to people. They're like, that one's a hard one to grip onto. What do you mean I'm source? You're an individual for sure, 100%, but you're also source. So it's
Yeah.
like having two sources, even though you're like, well, you're not higher than source. Listen to you comparing yourself. No, no, I am made of the same exact stuff. Source took his hand and put it into himself, popped out of Frankie, popped out of
Hmm.
Karen, and said, okay,
Hmm.
you guys do your adventures, do whatever you want to do. But in the end, you're going to be like me. Right. So when I did mushrooms with my wife, ayahuasca came into my mushroom trip, and she said, look at your wife because you keep thinking about Zeus for some reason. Why? I said, I watched a cartoon. He was in it. So I was like, oh, Zeus. So they showed me Zeus. She was like, here he is. He was like a dot. That was it. It was like a little thing. And then all these stars all of a sudden showed up. And she goes, all right. And each one of those is a being, right? So they all look exactly the same. I'm like, yeah. Okay, look at your wife. And then they put the dot over Paula, and it just went in. It was like tiny. And then they took all the dots and then put them into Paula and then said, look at the multiverse. And I was like, what is this? And they collapsed the whole thing. And every Zeus and every person, everything ever went inside of my wife, and she was standing there. And I'm like, whoa. And then I looked at ayahuasca, and she had the same thing going on. And she goes, you're like me. She is me. And you're just like me. You fell from the tree of Yggdrasil, the tree of life, because that whole thing is me. And then you survived and turned into your own tree, and you're growing. So you're going to have the same thing. And I'm like, what? That's really powerful. And she goes, right? We keep telling you, and you're not listening. You still think 4D beings got you. Like those guys are all here for you.
Hmm.
Everyone's here for
Hmm.
you.
Absolutely. Now, I was hoping you could, for those that are new to hearing you speak about your adventures and stuff, Frank, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit towards being a shaman, what that means, your use of psychedelics, things like that for people who aren't necessarily familiar. And then the other thing I want to get into is what I love about you is you and I, a lot of our experiences are what could be considered transdimensional, where beings come into our dimension or we go to theirs or we share some kind of common space. Whereas a lot of extraterrestrial experiencers, they describe their process as being very nuts and bolts. The spaceship came and it beamed me aboard, and I was scared, and it took me there, and it did this to me, and then they dumped me off. Well, my experience and your experiences are not only, uh, I think, more comprehensive, not to put anybody's experiences down, but ours also not only transcend the dimensional realities, but also all time and space, because what we experience has been talked about thousands of years ago in all the different shamanic realms, in all the different hidden mystery schools. We're actually living it, which is a huge privilege. And I hope to turn more people onto that part of the process, because then you don't need anything. You can do it whenever you want, right?
Yeah, it's the great remembering. You're activating the DNA inside of you. You're reforcing the evolution the enemy tried to stop, which they couldn't, so they stall it and make it just work slowly. But the cycles of the sun change that. Why? Because we're solar beings, literally solar beings. I had this weird thing last night. I was laying in bed and couldn't sleep, and I was thinking about the new Superman movie because I'm a superhero nut. And then I was thinking about his eye beams, and I'm like, oh, it'd be crazy if we had them. And I thought about that, and I thought about all the beings that I've ever seen in books and history that had these eye beams, right? And I can't help but go back to Shiva, right? I find out that Shiva has this and is able to use, he used it on the Valentine's Day guy, um, the guy that shoots you with the arrow, shot him.
Cupid.
Cupid
Cupid.
shot, according to that lore, Cupid shot Shiva with the arrow because his wife was reincarnated and trying to get back to him, and he would just keep turning her down. So he had it set up to where I'll shoot him, you go in, and everything will be good. And Shiva spots him as he's falling in love with the girl in front of him, and he knows I don't want to fall in love with her, but because I'm only looking for my wife. So he was blinded by that, gets shot with the arrow, looks up, sees him in the tree, hits him with the eye beams, and that he's gone. I'm like, wait a second, where else have I heard this weirdness? If you look into Hanuman, every demon fears him. Every demon. He can stare at you and just transmute you with these red eye beams. I'm like, wait a second, you guys are all creators. You are all solar being archetypes as well. They're like, yes, you come through, you're born through the sun, but you guys are also source. So you're made of the suns. That's why the whole sons of the suns concept was there.
Mhm.
We are that Superman, but we're not unlocked yet. So we have
Mhm.
all these innate abilities, and all these stories that we hear are all about us. All about us. And this is how ayahuasca made her connection very strong with me. She said, you've been reading it the whole time. You've been reading the story of you and everyone else the whole time, even in comic books. The story is always very similar. It's like it never changes. There's always
Mhm.
an enemy that's like not just the only enemy. There's like guys pulling the strings from the background. So you have Hydra and Spectra and Cobra. It's all the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's like infiltration everywhere, and you never know who's who. And you drop one and you think you got the bad guy, and another one pops up, right? But they send who? Captain America and the Punisher and all these guys, and they could take out 100 of them at a time. So you're like, oh, I almost feel safe that the balance is correct. Yeah, that's you guys. So I'm like, well, how did we get there? Well, ayahuasca would show me that they just lowered our DNA inside the flesh outfits. They're like, they put restrictors on. They couldn't stop it because you can't stop source. So we're
Mhm.
just going to slowly, which is what's happening now in our ascension cycle, which it's never really stopped. It just slowed up a little bit. And now we have to reclaim where we're at in this whole place. But
Mhm.
let's go back to your first question shamanically. So I talked about this heavily yesterday about being a shaman and having no other shaman to look to. So I was not traditionally taught, and I have to put that with an asterisk next to it because technically I'm being taught this round like I learned in the very first round when they first just discovered if you eat this and then drink this, this happens. If you mix this with this, this happens. So we're going to take a seed and a root and you're going to mix it. You're gonna you're gonna just do the process. You're gonna alchemize it because that's what you do. Everything's alchemization, right? You change it into this, and now drink that, and it's gonna bring you to me, and I'm mother. So in my first experience, I had a bunch of people around me, and one person I thought I can go to shamanically, but I passed him very quickly in like a few days. I was doing all these things that they were like, what the hell is going on? And I was doing it in front of them. I was able to prepare the brew without ever seeing the recipe because ayahuasca told me, you are my son, my
Mhm.
ambassador. I prayed to Source, and Source sent you to be born through me, making you my child, but also the answer to my prayers. So you're my ambassador. You sit on my right side and I hold you and you speak for me when I cannot be spoken for. And I said, okay, that's pretty crazy. So how am I supposed to learn how to do all this? And she said, me, I'm the teacher.
Mhm.
You're the forever student. And I said, I will be 100% with you because my life was terrible. I did so many good things in my life. I was so internally bored, no matter how big the event. with music, 20 years of it. I don't care how many people were there, how many girls were backstage. There's always drama. It was always the same thing. It never broke that cycle. And I was like, there's no fantasy left. What do I do? Then the archetype showed up the minute I gave it all up, walked away and gave 100%, just like I said I would, to the process. And by doing that, I was confronted with beings like Ra, Shiva, Ganesha, Kali. Like I had to learn that these beings exist, but they're also archetypes, but they're also here for us, and that they're energy masters. So a lot of them, the color of their skin, the way they're depicted, is the color of the energetic structure frequency vibration that they reside in, and they're masters of it. So they completely mastered certain things. So that's why each one of them shows up on the hero's journey, because each one of them is part of the archetypes of the hero's journey. You meet the
Mhm.
goddess, you meet the goddesses, you meet all the hero. When I met Horus, and Horus is like, I am you, you're me, right? And I go, oh, that's a little above my pay grade, I'm Source. And he goes, nah, future you is me. But then when my fractals collapsed into the from the timeline, when I was under one of my earlier experiences this year, I screamed for help because it was so it was like defragging my mind that I didn't know I was me anymore. And I just shouted, Horus, help me. You're me, help me. And then he goes, no, you got it wrong. You've always had it wrong. He came out of a fractal. He said, you're not a fractal of me, Frank. I'm a fractal of you. And I said,
Mhm.
what? And then he just collapsed into me. He's like, I'm with you, but you're the big guy. I'm not the big guy. Like the big guy's coming in and taking over. Like, and I felt like, wow, we're conquering this place with the help and the use of the archetypes, and getting an understanding that you are Source. This whole thing's here for you. If you go with that and understand, it's all real. It's all real. The
Mhm.
Bigfoots, the angels, the
Yep.
UFO people, it's all real,
Mhm.
but it's all there. So if you just go with that, and then your Source, and Source would create that, you save yourself a lot of the headache going, well, I'm Lyrian and I'm
Mhm.
a Syrian being, because on the higher level, none of that matters. On the highest level, you're like, oh yeah, no, it doesn't matter that I'm Pleiadian. I'm Source, and the
Mhm.
Pleiadians are here to see me, because I was one of them, or I am one of them in this now moment. There's the fractal of me standing, or she's standing right there looking at me, but I'm the one doing the great thing. You're the one doing. We're in the flesh, the human flesh suit. They're like, look, they're overcoming the ego computer that has them locked to two DNA strands. Like, this is the best show on TV for them, universally, multiversally. They're like, these beings, spirits, came in to a locked system and reprogrammed the flesh computer to grow and love and learn and just go, 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 go. And it unlocked the whole thing. And Source came in because they were everything before they were this, because it's Source. This is so hard to wrap your head around, but just it's all okay. Okay, so it's the everything. Yes. So you're the monkeys, and you were the birds and the fishes and the bacteria and the atoms and the little things and whatever. Okay. Okay, now you're going to come into this world, and you're going to realize that you are me, and now how this world reacts to you. Like they talk about future technology, like generators that you just, let me get a cup of coffee, and then boom, you have a cup of coffee. So my wife has trouble with this. She's like, well, how does the machine pull it out of the air? I'm like, because there's no air. Like, it's, you think you're breathing air, right? There's molecules of the entire everything, just everything is right here in front of you. And as Source, you can connect to the whole thing and the smallest of the small thing, the first thing. So you would like look at the smallest thing, which has everything in it, and say, I want a cup of coffee. Bloop, and it starts to manifest. That's manifestation. Manifestation is also pulling things towards you, being in the right moment at the right time, praying in advance for a parking space, right? I put love out to the universe for a parking space. I'm going to the game. I want to be right up front, right? And all of a sudden you weave in and out of traffic. You don't even realize it's going on. You just leisurely get there and pull right up front, and there's your space. It took you
Mhm.
no time, no effort, no energy. And people look at you then and go, what is he, lucky? And I'm like, no, I'm doing the thing that you can't. And it appears that way at first. But then
Yeah.
it gets a little crazy. Then it turns into magic. And this is what ayahuasca has
Mhm.
been teaching me, to get to the point of standing in the room with the aliens and angels. Like,
Mhm.
literally, they're like, we're right here. You don't worry about your dead relatives that are here and you see them. That's not going to scare you, because they're going to have
Mhm.
physical bodies in the other plane that you walk into. There's going to be people with physical flesh. It's just it's
Mhm.
going to be lighter. However,
Mhm.
you're not that, you're this, and you're going to then expand and see more. So all the other things that have always been around you, you got to be able to do this. So all my
Mhm.
training, everything I've done was to heal every one of my traumas, release all of my karmic everythings, then learn when it keeps happening to shut it down and say no more, throwing it into the vortex, transmuting the whole thing, and
Mhm.
realizing that I'm not here for a war, but I'm here to change this place, right?
Mhm.
War might be part of it, but I'm here to observe as I lock the frequency of source into the planet and we rise. So when
Mhm.
people start losing it, they can turn to, we would just already be there as a cushion barrier for everyone else.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Um, and it's interesting because it took me a long time to figure this out. I'm a lot older than you, Frank, but what's really amazing, and I do an exercise. I was actually even doing it this morning where I tap into the subplank level, which is also me, and I tap into what might be called an oversoul or the universal version of me, and I become a conduit so that the energy just flows as above, so below, and back up again. And it's quite interesting. I get an actual physical sensation from that. And it's all here. It's all real and it's all here. It's just we've been so heavily programmed and with self-limiting belief systems that I think the biggest job is shucking that off. And a good way to do that, as you mentioned, is shadow work, which is the most unpleasant, I would say, level of process, but absolutely essential. Frank, I'm wondering, I want to take a short break. I'm going to shamelessly promote my new book that's coming out. Only be 2 minutes. When we come back, I want to talk about the flow and the order and chaos. So I want to get your thoughts on that. So I'll be right back, everybody. Stay with us. And I know you want to hear about my new book. So here it is. Karen Holton shares her stunning details about ET diversity and culture, along with their advanced ways of living and expressing spirituality, which is in no way like anything imagined here on Earth. Transdimensional, meet the new neighbors, introduces you to many different ET beings, the healing pods, the interior of the big ship, her orientation process, cultural events, and off-world mating practices. Karen says, when I tucked myself into my bed for the night back in 2014, I had no idea that I would be transported to the big ship, meet many different extraterrestrial races of beings, become well acquainted with their culture, and visit numerous interesting worlds. While away, I learned a great deal about the big ship, intergalactic and transdimensional travel, intergalactic planetary research, and the various options for resettlement. My true life adventures continued night after night, and I had never experienced anything like this before. The first few times that I awoke back at home, I convinced myself that it had all been some kind of a fantastic dream. But while away, I was eating, sleeping, learning, and visiting, all the while experiencing what I perceived as days, weeks, and months. I am so happy to present you with my true nonfiction account of my weird little life. and the more important messages from beyond our realm that I have been tasked to share with all of you. Transdimensional, Meet the New Neighbors. Paperback available December 16th on Amazon worldwide. Kindle and Audible versions are coming soon. Yeah, so I'm pretty excited. That's a 3.5 year job putting that baby together. I'm really glad to finally have it out.
Congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you. And I get into the whole transdimensional reality. I do a juxtaposition of what's not working well on planet Earth and the alternative ways of doing things. So it gives people lots to think about. But anyway, I want to get back for those of you who are joining us a little later on the show. I am so happy to have as my guest Frank Castle, also known as Frankie Fearless, good friend of mine. We're talking all about his shamanic experiences, which are definitely transdimensional, if not absolutely ET oriented, and angelic oriented as well. I thought now maybe we could talk a little bit because you sort of touched on it before the break, Frank, and that is tapping into the flow. And also, what I have found that when I'm in the flow, we talked about parking spaces. So I call it just, we can all do it our own way. I call it Mrs. Bernstein. So I'm headed down to the mall. It's Christmas time. I know it's going to be nuts. I know parking's going to be an issue. And I just go, Mrs. Bernstein, can I please have a parking spot? That's just my weird way of doing it. Same thing what you talked about. I get there and boom, there's the parking spot right out front. Even if I have to drive around twice around, just as I'm coming around that second time, someone's pulling out and I get that parking spot. And I consider that very much tapping into the flow. And then when I think about the flow, how I experience it, and please, Frank, you can please feel free to use different words or different analogies for this, for however you see it. And that is that there is order in the chaos. So we're given the construct that we're born into, we're given a sense of order. What it is, in my belief, just in my opinion, is sort of a bureaucratic, structured system that we're supposed to participate in. And what we're taught is chaos is actually on a higher or the next magnitude higher is order, but it's the true order. And it looks like chaos because we're coming at it and looking at it from this very limited pre-programmed position. And of course, the powers that be don't want us to know that there's order in the chaos. But just in my opinion and in my experience, tapping into the flow is also tapping into that chaos, which is actually a much higher level of order. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, Frank.
So for me, it was with this understanding, I would say we've both been the cat, we've both been the dog. They run around the yard. It's very chaotic, right? And then it's time to eat. We call them in and they just eat right next to each other, right? And then they go back out and they get all chaotic. In this round, we have to be the bird, and the bird sees the chaos in the yard and doesn't want to be bothered with it. It's like a loop that never breaks. The cat running from the dog, chasing the mouse, but the bird doesn't see it that way. The bird's like, I'm breaking the cycle. It could also see every other yard where everyone else is doing it, and then can just fly off and above. It can choose to go into it, and it could, like you were saying, like we could choose to go into that. And when it's time for feeding, you could have the bird, the cat, the mouse all eating next to each other in different dishes. And then you pull back, it's time to go back to work. You can choose to stay in that, or you can leave, rise above it, become more from a position of a position you've never seen before, never witnessed, which is a position of power when you're observing, because you're no longer involved in it. You remove yourself from it and say, I get it, I understand it, but I am aware of more, and I choose to be more. And then it's like an automatic evolution into those positions. You'll notice at the higher positions, when you enter the chaos, when you're not supposed to, like when you're cocooning your energy and then you decide to go to a place where it's a little bit crazy, you find yourself not feeling like yourself. It doesn't feel right here. I'm out of position. I'm off balance. Even the drive here was uncomfortable and traffic filled. Whereas when you're where you're supposed to be following your true inner path, you'll find yourself in positions of even when there's traffic, you seem to move through it. I sat in traffic for 10 minutes the other day. My car never actually stopped. It never
Mhm.
stopped moving, and I was laughing with my wife, and we were for 20 minutes, we were just slowly moving, right? And when people I know watch from the outside, they're gonna say, "What is going on with some people?" Because it starts that way. It starts so small. It's a bathroom when you need it. These are like baby miracles. I need a beeline out that exit in case there's a fire. And then the fire happens, you know where the exit is, and you make a beeline out of it. You're the only one that looked up and saw that it was there. And fortunately for you, you made it, but no one else made it. These are all the things when you're aware, you start checking it. They said to me, Frank, it's going to sound weird right now, but I used to go to concerts before I was in the music group, and I would be standing in like 40,000 people, like in the middle of the day watching like Wu-Tang and other groups. So they were like, remember when everyone was pressed together and you couldn't move, but you still wound up finding your way back to your friends,
Yeah.
but it was hard and you had to like muscle your way through and move your way through. On this level, you'll have the same issue, but you'll be plotting because you can see it from high above, and you would move through without having to like they were showing me people sweating and like you had to like mush up against them and all weird stuff.
Mhm.
I don't want to do that. And then they showed me get to my people pretty quickly, like without having to do any of that. I moved through the crowd like, whoa, but people were watching me and they were like, oh, look, it looks like Frank's dancing through people.
Mhm.
I didn't even realize it. I was just moving. I was going like this, trying to get through, but it appeared as dancing to them, and I made it. They were like, "Wow,
Mhm.
he did that in one take." It's
Mhm.
crazier and crazier to where, like, I make jokes all the time, right? A wizard's never late. He's always on time, right? I'm always where I'm supposed to be, right? So when the moment happens for somebody and they're having their awakening, and then boom, I'm standing right there with them. They, oh wow, look at this. It's magical to those people. But I know I'm just getting into position because I'm seeing it from a higher place. Once they unlock and see that, they usually expand faster than the shaman at some point. Like the people that have worked with me and just opened up with ayahuasca and made her the teacher and it didn't
Mhm.
rely on her, just worked with her. They all shot past me at some point, became successful, internally, externally, being the creative people they are, they go on to live these really cool lives. So I'm like, at some point, you like put the rubber to the road and you get out there and you do what you were meant to do if you're paying attention. And when you have the awareness and don't pay attention to it, it starts to feel like there's no magic.
Mhm.
Everything I just spoke of, it's the opposite. Oh,
Yeah.
I can't do this. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's like all these doors are just shutting in all directions. But what happens when you have all these doors shut on you and you are aware and looking up from here, you always find the next way around. And you're like,
Absolutely.
well, if they shut it down, I'm like, well, we're born into a control system.
Mhm.
So they're telling me at some point the answer is no. If I'm not hurting anyone and not hurting myself and doing creative stuff, you're still telling me no. I'm telling you, yes, there's a way around this. Not only is there a way around this, there's a way to overtake this so we don't even have to listen to that, especially if it's in benefit to us.
Yes. Yes.
They teach us a regiment assigned to keep people in place.
Mhm.
Young age, from the slap, it took place. Like they get your attention. You're like, what? Traumatized immediately. Hit them with the doot doots and the doot doots and right? And then send them home. Oh,
Mhm.
shake them, make sure, feed them stuff he shouldn't be eating, right? And then now tell him he has to kneel and pray.
Yeah.
Tell him that someone had to die for his sins. I'm like, what?
Oh.
I right? You guys got to be kidding me, right? So we're breaking this. We're system breakers. See, so for
Mhm.
me, I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's cool. You guys did a lot of work that way. Unfortunately, it's got to go. Bing, house of cards, dominoes, boom.
Mhm.
Me and Karen are on both sides, right? We're like, oh yeah, 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 dominoes, boom. And what is that allows us to just do that? Oh, I'm just being here and being aware and being
Yeah.
responsible and anchoring the energy. You writing your book, me making my music, like just doing that is doing it. And it's doing it on a
Mhm.
level that we don't recognize it here, but the entire universal structure is paying attention to us.
Mhm.
Um, so all right, there's a question that keeps popping up into the chat. I would just want to, if I can, answer it. So it said, I learned a lot. I'm an avian from a different universe. Would source energy be the source, or does each universe have their own source? All right, I'm
Mhm.
going to explain this because that's a beautiful question.
Mhm.
Source is the whole thing. There's no outside of source, right? You can have different creators, different beings of hierarchy that maybe created the area that we decide to go in, or that's over there or in that dimension. It's still made of source. Everything is made of source. Even in the place where things say there's no such thing and God can't reach into the pit, that's a lie. And it's the pit is source. The absence of source is source as well. There is no, like our human brains have a hard time with this one. But
Mhm.
you, me, different beings and creatures are antennas to that. We are that, but it doesn't matter if you're an avian or this one or that one. It's all source, it's permeating, connecting you by tether to this all. So, though you may jump around in different multiversal structures, universal dimensional structures, transdimensional things, whatever, you're an antenna. You Each one of those energies may feel different to you, but is still of source. And this is what
Mhm.
I was saying earlier about learning from the different my shamanism. The neo shamanism comes from working with Shiva and Horus and all the different characters. They all know each other. Space Jesus, they're all there,
Yeah.
right? But to learn what they know, they would call it melting with their energy. So like Shiva has like blue throat chakra kind of energy things going on.
Mhm.
So he's like a master of this stuff. So I had to like become his friend. I'm using air quotes because you're really blending with the energy because there's only energy. It's like swirls in you. And then you become it, it becomes you. You learn what it has to teach you. And then you're to put it in use immediately because it will help your life in every direction for that piece that you're working on. And then, like with Shiva, I had to meet him. He's like my buddy. I want to be just like him all of a sudden. And I'm doing all this stuff. And I kind of graduate from being in his energy and meeting Kali. Now I'm not afraid of her because people are like, Kali's a demon. I'm like, no, she's the archetype. And that purplish color comes out. And then me and her twist and twirl. And I call it like making love to the energy because you become it,
Mhm.
it becomes you. And then you're like, oh, I can do all the things you can do now, but I gotta put all the uses into practical. It's like I took a class and I learned all this stuff from this specific teacher. I put it into play, and then I meet Ganesha. And then he comes
Mhm.
out, he's a little more playful, hyper loving, but then he can be dead serious, knows how to defend himself against, demons and different things. So you're like, oh, so I didn't learn all that from them. I'm going to learn this from this guy. So you
Mhm.
learn and then you move on. You're not to like pray to these characters, and they'll tell you, we'll take the prayers. We don't care. It's not like we can stop you from doing that. You're in the
Mhm.
everything. So to be in the all and to be the all inside the everything, inside the chaos and the order of things, it's all ordered. All of it. There is no
Mhm.
chaos.
Yep.
This whole thing is built for you guys to get in there and get your hands dirty. It's like you come into the structure on the higher dimensional planes or the higher density levels, right? And then, like, let's say you drop out of source. So now you're pretty powerful. You're like this light body, and you're like, "Rah." Eventually, over time, you go down in density because you're made of everything because you come from source, but now you're going to go do it. You
Uh-huh.
lose all your powers and abilities, and you find yourself inside the atom. You don't even know what it is. And then you live that life. The next thing occurs, the next thing occurs until you start working your way back up. Now we're here. We're having the human experience. We get to get our
Uh-huh.
powers and abilities back. They Aya argues with me. She goes, they're not superpowers if you're just everyone has them. I go, yes, but everyone can't activate them at the same time. She goes, correct. So I go, so then an ability such as levitation or telepathy. She goes, no, that's basic universal stuff. You thinking like, oh, you can do that. Like all these beings could do that. Like you're just
Uh-huh.
supposed to do that outside of the matrix that you guys are
Uh-huh.
in. Everyone
Uh-huh.
has telepathy. Everyone does this. Everyone does that.
Yep.
And I'm like, you do? And they're like, yeah, that's basic stuff. But your
Yep.
source, so you can manifest. So Frank was trying to teach me how to fly. And she's like, I would get, I would have you, it would take me this long, like 100 years to teach you how to fly. If I was to actually sit here with you, it'd take 100 years. But in this lifetime, I can teach you how to open portals and just walk through wherever you want to go because that's what you're built to do. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, you can fly, but you're built to do that. So, if you had to fly there, it would take you a long time. But if you
Uh-huh.
could just open a portal and walk through, you're magic, baby. The whole thing works
Uh-huh.
for you. Time and space, space and time.
Yep. Yep, absolutely, Frank. Absolutely. I was thinking while you were speaking to this, those of you who know me fairly well know that I spent 17 years of my adult life as a Jehovah Witness, which I'm still recovering from. I had to undo a lot of programming to get where I'm at today. But I want to just say a thought that came to me is, sometimes we get these sacred secrets and they're so profound and we have such a deep understanding what they mean. But if you try to explain it the next day, it's gone. And it reminded me of manna from heaven. Manna would come down, feed the Israelites, but it would go rotten if it was kept for too long. It's almost like we need to absorb and just take it as one step. We got what we needed from it, and then tomorrow there's a new dish, a new
So,
understanding that comes. And I'm wondering what your thoughts would be
so
about that, Frank.
okay, so like the hoarding of the information, the energy, the required sustenance to move on. They're like,
Mhm.
you are the sustenance. You are abundant. This is so crazy. So Chief Hollowbone was like, so you know how they call me Hollowbone? I'm like, yeah. No. Well, what does it mean? They're like, okay. So if you hollow out a bone and you fill it with love, right? And you got all this love in there and you just give it away freely and empty it all out. Just give it away. All this love. I love you. I love you. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. And then the bone, the inside drains. Now it's hollow again, except source somehow finds the ability to fill it with 2 times the amount it was just filled with. Do it again. And then you're like, wait a second. So he just refills it. So double fits back into this same place where just a single. Follow me along. Then I give all of that away. No problem. And then he doubles it again, puts it back in, and it's infinite. Right? So there is no, well, will it work? No, it works. Eat it and move on to your next destination. There's more over there, and you're going to be plentiful. That's the
Mhm.
thought of that. It's like you really don't think you're good enough to be plentiful enough, even with the gods helping you. Give me a break. We're not lowly beings. They built us. The joke of the heist within a heist is that from above we knew what was going on. We knew what was going to happen 100%. Came into the
Mhm.
body to actually just have the experience, and then people got called here. They all came. Everybody came back. We get into the outfits thing, have amnesia. So the enemy is like, oh, that we have so many source beings that we're feeding on. scan everyone and get all the information from everyone. We're going to find out when they're going to evolve so we can put another thing in them or do something crazy to them. And they check everyone and nobody knows what's going on for real 100%. So then they're like, oh, nobody knows on. Let's just go back to eating. And they don't realize they just went past their time of their where they're supposed to give it up and move on. And
Mhm.
they're like, no, we can keep this process alive. Now we went all the way over here and they were doing that. And then Source is like, okay, start popping off randomly. And I'm like, whoa. When I met Space Jesus, he said to me, you're going to do the things I can do and way more, way more. But here's a little knowledge. One Space Jesus, the way you guys talk about Space Jesus, the way you guys write about him and everything, they're like, one of those is good for the whole universal structure, right? And every universal structure would have one. Here's the thing. There's not one, there's many, many already. And there's about 4 billion of you light body beings here ready to rock and roll, right? So if we just randomly pop them off, how's the system going to stop that if it's a random? They didn't know. Now all of a sudden Frank knows, attack Frank. Well, Karen knows. Now that Karen knows, attack. Well, there's Chris. Well, attack him. Well, there's Paula. Attack them all. We don't have enough guys to attack them all. And as the system attacks them, the system doesn't have enough tentacles to reach into everyone. They think they do, but they don't. That's the trick. They trick you to think they have the ability. But I'm creating the reality. You're not, obviously.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm the guy that has that ability. You're not. And I'm not judging like the next man over. I'm judging the enemy. Our enemy as a collective group doesn't have the power to create. They can amalgamate just like the AI. The AI is not creating anything. You ask that thing to create a song, it's pulling from all the created songs to build its song. So it can't just make a song out of thin air that nobody's ever heard before, even though they're doing it. It's fake, but this is the real. And we're about to overtake it, and the system's collapsing because the system exists outside of us because it exists inside of you. So as you believe that the system works, it works the way the system works. It's a failed formula. So you'll just keep failing in the formula or succeeding at points and then failing.
Mhm.
Right. And then at other things, when you break the system, it's an infinite upward movement. The way people talk about Bitcoin, it's
Mhm.
just going to go to the moon. That's what happens when you break it inside of you and you go, no, I'm not taking this and I'm not doing that and I'm not eating that and I'm not doing any of these things. That no, that you make that statement and you stand on is locking in the source energy of no longer wanting the false and the fake. And if we all just take care of ourselves and heal that trauma and cut the cords and make the statements, you radiate outward. And for every one that doesn't have their hands up for Space Jesus to come back, that's actually activating, you send out a wave. And that, see, me and Karen have the wave, right? I'm in New York and she's where she lives, and it emanates from us outward to you. And then as you do it, you emanate it to everyone else back that's doing it magnetically. This
Mhm.
is what Phil was talking about. He's like, it's a magnet. I go, it is a magnet because you're the
Mhm.
great attractor. It's source. So you take any of our enemies, Karen, and you go, here's a piece of paper. Show me how you're going to win against source. And they go, oh, we're not fighting source. We're just tinkering with the human flesh to keep you here to do this, that, the other thing. And I go, oh, but I'm source. And they go, oh, he knows. Let him go. Literally, as long as they see that you know, you must glow a color when you
Mhm.
understand. And they're like, oh, okay, next, move on. They just leave you alone. The system moves
Mhm.
on to the next one because it needs the people it can keep in the meat machine. We don't allow the meat machine to take us, and we believe what they taught us was all a lie.
Mhm.
There's truth in the lies, so you got to be smart about this. Pick out what you need and move on, and you move above the system and you All of a sudden, the 50-year-olds are looking like 30-year-olds.
Yeah, that's funny.
Right? It's working back. Everyone around me is starting to look younger, and I have the whitest beard. I grow it like this on purpose sometimes. And I'm like, oh, yeah, look at me, the grizzled old dude. And they're like, dude, you look like you did when we were on stage 10 years ago. You look exactly the same. And I'm like, oh, so I helped the process. I'm injured. I'm beat up. And it's getting better, though. Something's going on bigger than me,
Mhm.
but your source, you got to believe that. Like when I pray, it's internally through me, and I'll go source, and it'll go, yes, you can. And I'll go, but I didn't. Oh, of course, you would know exactly what I'm asking. And my higher self is like, listen, hear me out. Do this right now instead of this. Try it. Just try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it does, maybe something good will come out of it. And then I write the best song I've ever written. And I'm like, oh, I got right into the flow state. Bro, we were talking about the flow state. To get in that, you have to be aware. And sometimes you're going to be like, oh, I don't want to do this right now, or I don't know if I can. When you give yourself over to it, it becomes like you're dancing through the scenario. Michael Jordan get in the flow state. Athletes do this all the time, where you could watch them do it. It's like he's just shooting from every direction. He's dunking on everybody, and he's just moving. Even when he's sick, he gave himself into the flow. That's like Luke giving himself to the force. So you're not
Yes.
fighting someone. When you're fighting someone, you're holding your sword tight, and you're like, they're like, yo, relax, relax, relax. Yes, we're angry. Yes, but you got to focus, because that anger and holding your weapon like that will get you killed. We know you're strong. We know you're angry, but that's not how you use that tool. The tool is used like this. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is crazy. You level it up and you go, wow, that's what they meant. Right? So many
Yeah.
times people find Buddha 10,000 miles away and they go, Buddha, it's so good to see you. Do you have any special things you could say to me? Because I made it all the way here 10,000 miles just to see you. And he goes, love yourself more. And you're like, this little fat, how dare he say love myself? Do you know I have more love than he has? And you're like, whoa, dude, you need to go love yourself some more. You didn't need
Yeah.
the 10,000 miles to find that. But
Yeah.
this is this
Yeah.
is this is the place, the infinite, all.
Mhm. Mhm. I call it the now with a capital N, the infinite now.
Yeah, the now
And,
moment. It's all
yeah,
here.
yeah, and even tapping into the flow, with me working on my book, sometimes I would just step away and go, "Wow, where did all that come from?" It's all true, it's all accurate, but I don't feel that I'm smart enough to actually synthesize it and put it out in exactly that form. It's almost like another force activating from within me, which I love. I love that so much. And then the big lesson for me is, Karen, you don't need to worry about anything, because if the force can operate through you to do that, it can do it. Same with the whole rest of your life. Take it easy, enjoy being an old lady and my cats, which is another thing you and I have in common, is this thing for cats.
I love
Um,
my cats.
yeah, passionately. Now we're quickly running out of time, Frank. So what I would like you to do, if you don't mind just switching gears, is tell people what you're up to. Tell them what you're doing with your music. Tell them what you're doing with your show, what else you're doing. Doesn't matter, feel free to, talk about whatever you want. And also tell people where they can reach you. Now in the description will be your links, but some people will be listening to this on audio, and it's good for them to hear where they can find you as well. So if you don't mind spending a few minutes talking about what you do and what you're up to and your offerings and where people could find you, that would be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So my show, Fearless, you can watch on YouTube. You could see it on Rumble at Starship Fearless, and on YouTube you could see it at Fearless Tribe or Frank Castle's Fearless. You come check out the show. I have all my interviews, Fearless Conversations, where I have my guests. I never really did guests. it was weird for me because it was like, tell your story. But then I hit a point where our stories were just crossing. And I'm like, they got to meet everyone else. Like, you're not reading the comic just to see me all day. It's a team book. It went from like when Wolverine came out, it was Wolverine, and then he joins the X-Men, and now it's just X-Men. It's Wolverine has his comic, but everyone reads the X-Men. There's a reason for that. And now we're here, and it takes us to connect to us, right? So what I've been doing with my time, I do the show maybe twice a month, and then try to do another 2 shows. You could check them out there. And then Sons of the Sun Music, right? You could find us on YouTube there. You can find us actually anywhere there's music. I don't promote a lot of the Spotify's and stuff because we're going at it with them right now. We've had it with them. So we're trying to do direct to consumer, but we had to change the whole business model. But man, we're creators. We want to just do music, high frequency music. It's nostalgic because it brings you back to a time when music was just better with the vibe that you're looking to get. I do hip hop. I'm so depressed around hip hop. I don't listen to hip hop today at all. And now I don't listen because of the P. Diddy stuff, which I dealt with through Jay-Z from Def Jam. So when he was president of Def Jam, I was already in music 8 or 9 years, and then got signed to them. And I made it 16 weeks before they ripped up our contracts and fired us. They literally kicked us out. We're like, you guys got to go. And we saw it all there. We witnessed the demons and the masters, and the weird parties are crazy. So we decided to change it. We don't want to be that. We don't want to be attached to that. So the high frequency music Sons of the Suns music is doing now is hyper relevant to or even our lyrics about relevant right now, right into the future, what we're about to do, where we're going, what it's been, but what we are and what we're going to become. So it's all the positive is being put out there. You could just check me out there. And if you want to find me on Twitter, who's been amazing lately, just got verified, x.com/Frankie Fearless. Come follow me. I'll follow you right back. We grow together. We go together. We're all going in at once now. This isn't about me no more. It's not about getting famous. It's not, for me, it's not about any of this stuff. I have to rise above it because the reality of it is we're going to do it right now, and we're going to do it together. So I'm focusing on that part of it, where you got to love your cats more, love your wife more, love yourself more. Find the trauma, even if you feel like there's no more trauma. Somebody days, I'm going to find one and get rid of it. I'm going to heal it because I'm going to become that thing that I should have been because it's my birthright. So remember to stay fearless, everyone, and the universe rewards bravery. Karen, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, Frank. My pleasure anytime. And I wanna thank you for being on the show. I also want to thank all those that came out to the live chat today. Lovely to see you all. Lovely comments. I posted as many as I could right here on the screen. We don't always have time to get to everybody's comments, but we did catch a couple of questions. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate you for being here. And of course, all of you who are watching on the replay or one of the audio podcasts, I appreciate each and every one of you so very, very much. And I guess that's it for today. And we will see you Wednesday for the Quantum Guide Show. It's an hour later on Wednesdays, or we might see you hopefully next week on Aliens and Angels. So without further ado, we'll say goodbye and we'll see you next week, everybody. Thank you for joining me for the Aliens and Angels podcast. Become the change that you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to my YouTube, Rumble, and X channels at Karen Holton TV. Click the like button, leave me a comment, and share this podcast with your friends. Check out my website at www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com to see my free resources and amazing products and services. All of the links will be in the description below. As part of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, You will also find the Quantum Guide Show with Karen Holton on all audio platforms. Until next time, keep up the good work.